All right, everyone, welcome back. Remember, guys, to subscribe, comment, share, like if the videos are helping you in any way. All right, so just like the title says, I'm going to show you how to fix the trigger on the Glock 42. All right, much needed, and I'll walk you guys through it in chronological order. All right, firearm is clear. All right, let's jump into it, guys. The trigger on this thing is nastier than the alien in Terminator movie. All right, so here's what we did to get rid of it and to fix everything. 100% reliable, by the way. Okay, so the first thing I did was I changed the firing pin spring. All right, guys. To get to it, it's tucked inside of here. So you have to pull the liner back while pushing this back plate towards this way. Okay, keep your finger there because you got some spring tension here. All right, you don't want anything to fly out. So that's how you pull it out of there. You guys can Google the other videos or search the other videos on YouTube on how to actually, take the spring off. All right, but that's the location. So what I did was I went with a 5.5. I'm sorry, the stock is 5.5 pound. Okay, that's the weight. I always go with 5 pound. All right, Wolf. It helped. Didn't do much. The firearm came with the minus stock connector, which I have switched out. All right, but it did help a little bit. So for those who like the stock trigger and you just want a little bit of help, then all you need to do is change the firing pin spring. All right, you can go down to a 4.5, but you're pushing it. All right, they say that is reliable and you won't get light primer strikes. I've never used the 4.5 pound firing pin spring. I always get the results that I need with the firing pin being 5 pounds. Okay, now of course for me that wasn't enough, so I kept going. All right, the next thing that I did was your safety plunger is here. Okay, while you have the back plate off, your spring tension here. Okay, the rod that is inside here controls your extractor. So you want to pull that rod out far enough, turn your slide to the side, push in the safety plunger, and the extractor will pop right out. All right, guys. Now, once the extractor is out, because you can't get the plunger out of there until the extractor comes all the way out. All right. Then you just press it again. It'll pop up, and then you can get it out of there. All right. You want to go reduce power on the plunger spring. Okay, guys, reduce power on the safety plunger spring. All right, after that, the next thing I did, because that still wasn't enough. That helped a little bit, but that still wasn't enough. All right, the stop wall on this thing is terrible. And like I said, it came with a minus connector, and that's supposed to be the best connector that ships from Glock. All right, guys, it still was horrible. The next thing I did was back here, okay, is your trigger spring. Now, they make two different trigger springs. You can get 25% reduced power. I'm sorry, extra power. You want to go extra power. 25% extra power and 50% extra power. All right. I started off with the smallest increment, went 25% extra power. Okay. There's videos out there on YouTube that'll show you how to take that out, okay, and remove it on the newer trigger spring housings or the extractor housings that they have here. And go ahead and search that, guys. You can figure out from watching those videos how to do that. Okay. So we did that. Still wasn't good enough. And when I say good enough, what I'm referring to is that the wall is so hard with the stock connector that it pulls your shot off. Okay, you can dry fire these guns. Okay, you can dry fire the Glocks, I should say. And when you get a new gun, you want to dry fire it. And what you want to do is aim at something. Make sure the weapon is clear. All right, aim at something. Take a breath, and while you're holding your breath, slowly pull the trigger straight back towards you. Okay. If that firearm moves left or right anyway, and you got a tight grip on the firearm, then from there it's either your trigger or your trigger connector or something inside the trigger mechanism, all right, that is running amok. All right, guys. So, boom, we did those. Still at a crossroad. Okay. From there, what I did was I polished all of the contact points. All right. So I polished right here where the trigger bar rubs across the safety plunger. While I had the safety plunger out, I polished the safety plunger. All right. Also, I tried polishing the friction areas on the stock minus connector. So I did that. Still wasn't enough. All right. It was still pulling my shot offline. My trigger pull got a little bit better, but still pulling me offline. So I did all I could to try to keep the minus connector in because, I read a lot of reviews that the minus connector was pretty good. All right. And it's just the wall was too hard, So from there, I knew I needed to either change out my connector, all right, or the actual trigger, or both. So from there, I said, well, let me just go ahead and try the connector. So what I did was I swapped to a Ghost Edge. So it's a drop in. So I got the Ghost Edge connector. All right. So once you put the Ghost Edge connector in, do not bend it. All right. Some connectors, they come like a little, out of sorts when you get them. Just drop it in. Try it like that first. Okay. Mine was fine. When I tried it that way, I didn't have to do, any bends to it to make it reset properly or anything like that. All right. Everything was already working good as soon as I dropped it in. All right. Played around with it, did some dry firing, and it was much better. Okay, guys, much better. Still, wanted to get a little bit more improvement out of it. Get it a little bit slicker, a little bit more smooth. So I took it back out and then I polished all the friction points on the Ghost Edge connector. Okay. And then while I had the trigger bar out, all right, I actually noticed that I had a slight burr on my trigger bar. All right. So I just smoothed that out with like 120 grit. It was either 80 grit or 120 grit sandpaper. And I just brushed it across there very lightly. I didn't remove any material or anything. I just knocked the burr off. All right, guys. So got that off of there. Made sure my trigger spring and everything was seated properly. All right. Inside the trigger pin, the trigger spring housing or the ejector housing. All right. Now, reassembled the gun after that. And we were almost there, almost. So we had more of a rolling break. All right. It wasn't 100% rolling break, but we had something that I can live with. Okay. We had a good rolling break. Took some of the edge, off of that hard wall that was there, the Ghost connector did. And I knew that's the best that we were going to get, out of that situation. Okay. Now, the only thing left after that was on the tip of the firing pin where the firing pin engages the rear of the trigger bar. was a little rough across there. All right, all my other Glocks, it was more smooth when it came stock. Okay, this one here was a little bit rough. So I took that, it was either 80 or 120 grit, took the firing pin out and just brushed it across there a few times. All right, guys, just to smooth it out. All right, reassembled it a lot better. Okay, did the practice aim, and at that time, you know, I had this trigger in. Actually, this is the same as the, which one is this that I had? The this is the aftermarket trigger, but it's actually shaped the same as the stock trigger. It just has pins in it. So if you ever want to go back to this trigger, all right, you can go ahead and put this trigger back in. Whereas once you pop this trigger out, okay, it's not suggested that you reuse it. Okay, so that's the only difference in these two triggers. Okay, guys. So what I noticed was, and this is my favorite trigger, stock trigger from Glock, it's the smooth edge trigger. Okay, the edges are rounded off. And what I noticed was that my finger was rolling around the edge and allowing me to move the firearm ever so slightly. All right, guys. So I was like, well, I'm going to have to get a flat face. All right. And these smaller guns, it's more easy to move the firearm around ever so slightly, you know, than it is with the larger guns. All right. So I went ahead and ordered the trigger that you see here, guys. All right. Tango Down, Vickers Tactical, they tag teamed up to bring us this. All right, guys. Once I did that, the flat face allowed me to get a straight back pull on the trigger. And once the shot broke, so to speak, gun did not move. All right, guys. So I was able to accomplish what I look for in all my Glocks after I get finished with all the spring changes and mods or anything like that if it needs it. That's how we did it. Now, this trigger, it does not have any screws. It's not adjustable. Okay. So you get the same amount of pre-travel. All right. Doesn't alter anything. Okay. It just feels better. All right, guys. It already has a short amount of pre-travel anyway. Those of you that like the 1911s, you may want it, you know, reduce it. There's ways that you can reduce it and still have a functioning safety plunger. But at this time, I haven't done any reduction to the pre-travel. All right, guys. But the trigger is 100% reliable. Everything we did had no hiccups at the range. We put 100 rounds through it, 2 different sessions, not one problem. All right, guys. And that's running it with 7-round ETS magazine plus 1 extension. All right, guys, so there you have it. That's what I had to do to get all the bumps and bruises and pains, aches and pains, so to speak, out of my Glock 42 trigger. Subscribe, like, share, comment. Also, guys, that put me at 2 pounds, 10 ounces. All right. So 2 3/4 pounds on the trigger pull weight. See you on the next one.